Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Rapid Soil Regeneration webinar series. This is the fourth webinar in this series, and we're going to be talking about launching your soil regen career. So let's go through the agenda for today's meeting. We're going to have an introduction of our panel, and we do have a special guest today, Graham Bell, who's one of the leaders in the permaculture movement. And then we'll talk about the Soil Food Web training program and the Launch Your Lab Plus offer. So I have a short little video to go through that particular offer and the different programs that we have. And then we'll have a question for you folks. We'll have an audience poll that we're going to ask where you are coming from as far as your experience and why you're trying to gain this knowledge. And then we'll have a Q&A session, which will last about 20 minutes. And then we'll get into another video around York Farms. It's a case study from one of our colleagues, Todd Harrington, who's a Soil Food Web consultant. And then we'll have another Q&A session, number 2, which will be roughly about 30 minutes to answer any kind of questions that you folks might have. And then we'll have another video or animation called on nutrient cycling. And then we'll follow that with another Q&A session. We're expecting that today's webinar is going to last about 120 minutes. And so let's go ahead and dive right into it. We do have some instructions, or what we call the webinar rules of engagement. So everybody who's not a panelist will be muted during the duration of the webinar, just because there's a lot of folks attending and we want to make sure that we have good audio quality. But you still have an opportunity to communicate with us. So in your interface that you're using, the site that you're going to the live stream here, there's a green box. And if in that green box, if you have a question that you want to ask of us, and then we have moderators behind the scene that will go ahead and take your questions, and we'll post that up there. And if you want to converse with other attendees and just kind of be in a live chat, there is a blue live chat box. And if you want to see some instructions on how to use those two tools, click on the instructions button. And I'm going to show a little graphic of that web page here in just a second. So again, like we mentioned, if you have a question, use the green box. If you want to get into live chat, use the blue box. And when we do put up the poll, there's a little purple button, and I'll show a little graphic of this when we get ready to ask or launch the poll. You can click on that and it will bring you right to the poll, so you can answer on that as well. Okay, so let's talk about who's going to be our panelists for today's webinar. So we have Dr. Elaine Ingham, who's the founder of the Soil Food Web School, and probably why most of you are actually here today is to hear the knowledge and her experience in doing the Soil Food Web School and the work she's done to help convert large-scale agriculture into farming with biology. And then we have Graham Bell, who's the chair of the Permaculture Scotland and renowned permaculture trainer in Scotland, UK. We have Renald Flores, who he's a Soil Food Web consultant and has Flores Send Systems, and he's based out of Europe as well. We have Keisha Wheeler and Casey Ernst, who own a commercial composting company called Catalyst Bioamendments, and they're out here in Northern California. And then I'm your host today, but my name is Brian Vagg, and I'm a Soil Food Web consultant as well, and I own a company called Sprouting Soil. So we're going to give about 5 minutes for each one of the panelists to introduce themselves, so you know kind of where we're coming from and the experiences that we have. So Elaine, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. So I'm Dr. Elaine Ingham, and I've been working in the area of trying to understand what these organisms are doing in the soil. Why are they there? When I first started working on my PhD at Colorado State University, my major professor said to me, go and talk to all of the other soil scientists, the professors of soil science, or hydroponics, or horticulture, anything having to do with soil, and talk to them about your interest in what it is these organisms do in the soil, and specifically on fungi. That was the question that my major professor wanted me to work on, was how do we identify if organisms are actually performing a function in the soil, or whether they're just kind of hanging around, taking a nap or taking it easy, or the conditions in the soil really aren't right for them to be able to grow and be performing any functions. How do you tell that kind of difference? It's, it's not like we can walk up to a little bit of fungus and tap it on the shoulder and say, hey, are you awake? My husband, a nematologist, for example, was doing something very similar to that with nematodes. And one of the questions they wanted to have answered is, we see these nematodes just lying in a soil solution. They're just there, kind of not moving, not doing anything. Are they dead? Or are they alive? Are they just taking a nap? Are they going to be able to come back? What does it take to wake them up? And they took dental picks and would poke the nematodes to see if they would respond. And, most of the time when you poked them once, they, moved off and they didn't like being poked. But there would be times where you poke that nematode with the dental pick. And yes, you have to have good hand-eye coordination because you're staring through a microscope in order to see those nematodes, in order to see the tip of that dental pick poked the nematode. And there would be times where we'd poke the nematode, not move, no response at all. Poke it again, no response. Poke it again, no response. And you're starting to feel like, okay, this must be a dead nematode because, we poke. And so you'd give one last try and that nematode would wake up and it would just go zooming off someplace else. And we always called those teenager nematodes because isn't that like when you're trying to wake up your son or daughter? They don't want to get up and go to school. No, don't make me. I'm not moving. So how do you tell whether something's actually functioning in the soil? And is it important for us to be able to understand how much of any of our communities are actually alive and capable of performing a function? So that was what I was going to be working on for my PhD. And after I explained this to all of these different professors, I can categorize their response. There was only one type of response. These organisms in the soil don't matter. They're not important. There isn't any reason for you to do a PhD project. You'll come out the other end and you will not be sellable. You won't be able to find a job because these organisms aren't important. And my response was to that kind of across the board observation was that these organisms have been on this planet. Bacteria, for example, 4 billion years ago, those bacteria were found on this, in the fossil record, in various, in the ice and things that has been frozen for that long. You find bacteria and they're capable of waking up and growing and they're down there doing things. Well, how about fungi? 3.5 billion years ago, those fungal hyphae started to occur in the fossil record. So they've been on this planet for that long. Nature doesn't keep anything around just because they're cute, just because, fungi are my favorite critters. Protozoa and nematodes, they've been around for 2-3 billion years. Rooted plants have only existed on this planet for the last 1 billion years. So these organisms were in the soil performing whatever function for longer than we've had rooted plants. So rooted plants didn't need to have the ability to do the processes that all the bacterium, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, earthworms, the whole soil food web could do. Plants didn't need to, also have that ability. They stuck their roots down into the soil and they expected whatever these organisms do would be done. So what is it exactly that bacteria, fungi, protozoa, the whole food web, what is it that they do? And in the foundation courses, we go through the 7 overarching principles. These are the benefits that every plant needs to have somebody working on these processes around their root systems. Plants don't have the ability to go out and grab their own nutrients. There are massive amounts of inorganic, not soluble nutrients present in the soil. You've got boatloads in your sands, your silts, your clays, rocks, pebbles, and the organic matter that you have in the soil. There is no reason for us to need to use inorganic fertilizers. So why are we being convinced that we can only grow plants when we, plants to feed everybody on the planet only can happen if we put inorganic fertilizers out there? So, take a look at the mountains around you. Take a look at the forests that exist in all of these places. Nobody's ever put inorganic fertilizer out there. How old are some of those plants? 100, 200, 500, 700, 1,000, 2,000 years old? Those plants, those trees, those sequoia, those redwoods have been grown in the same place for that long. And an acre of those sequoia take up more nutrients and store them in the body of that tree than are removed by any crop you want to talk about in our agricultural systems, removing nutrients out of the soil. So how can the next generation of plants grow? They have their secret weapon. It's called bacteria and fungi and protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, earthworms, incatriids, all of those critters in the soil. And what we'd like to be able to do is explain to you exactly why carbon sequestration is improved massively if we get a fungal component back into that soil. If you don't like weeds, how do you control that? You do not till if you've got weed problems. You have to alter the balance of nitrate and ammonium. And you do that by getting the right sets of microorganisms in the soil to fix that problem. Nutrient cycling, nutrient retention, disease resistance, these are all things that Mother Nature solved by getting the right microorganisms into the system. And that's what we as farmers need to do. And you need to understand that so you don't have to buy inorganic fertilizers or pesticides or toxic chemicals of any kind. You don't have to be adding additions once you've got all that right biology back into the soil. So hopefully you'll stick around and learn a few things. Good examples are going to be given to you today. So I hope you enjoy this opportunity to start to learn about all these things.
Thank you, Elaine. All right, Graham, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, people. Thanks very much for that, Elaine. Permaculture is something that was thought up in Tasmania and Australia back in the 1970s, short for permanent agriculture originally. It's really a toolbox for sustainability. It's about how can we consciously design for all the needs of human beings anywhere on planet Earth. Now, soil is absolutely crucial because without soil, we have no civilization. We can't feed ourselves, obviously, but it's the basis of being able to be civilized. But along with that, it was discovered that we needed other things. So as well as being permanent agriculture, it gradually became to be seen as permanent culture. And why would that be? Well, let's say you've been through this program and you've now got this fantastically fertile soil without using poisons, without using inorganic chemicals and so on. Now you've got a harvest, and hopefully it's an abundant one. And indeed, statistics from this organization show that people have been able to as much as double their yields by going down this route. Not likely to happen day one, but gradually, incrementally, it's possible to totally change your product. But one of the problems that farmers face worldwide is that they don't control the market. So how can you also, if you're a farmer, think about keeping more added value in your community? So instead of just being a primary producer, how can you add value to product? Keep more of that money circulating where you are. Reduce food miles. create employment in rural areas rather than people bleeding to the cities, as this is happening worldwide, and do that in a sustainable way. When you add value to product and it's sold locally, it's fresher, it's healthier for people, it's closer to home, it reduces food miles. So energy usage becomes another prime concern as to how do we manage sustainable agriculture. You know, maybe you're driving the biggest John Deere tractors there are. In a carbon deficit world, that's going to be less of an option, you know? How can we reduce our reliance on carbon fuels? So, Elaine mentioned abandoning tillage as much as possible. I don't preach no tillage, I do preach minimum tillage, because tillage actually destroys soil structure. So if we can get into things like direct drilling and so on, I've seen this done magnificently in Iowa. There are great examples of it in Southern Africa, where people like Alan Savory are promoting using the bush as it was meant to be to produce livestock. And in terms of North America, for example, we have great examples, people like Gabe Brown. If you read Dirt to Soil, his great biographical description of converting his landscape in North Dakota, what you gradually begin to see is the importance of family, keeping family working on the farm, adding in high-value product. His son starts an egg business. His eggs are 3 times the price of the eggs in the supermarket, but they're so much better that he's got a backlog of people wanting to buy from him. How do we bring these kind of factors together into a fair trade production from our land? And in that, we'll be looking at the value of woodlands and the importance of wildlife, how wildlife, instead of being pests, actually become our pest prevention. People say they don't like having aphids because they're a vector for virus yellows in wheat. I say you've got a problem if you don't have aphids, because if you don't have aphids, you don't have aphid predators. It's all about achieving balance, and how do we make that work? And in the process, we'll show you how to balance all this with local climate, weather, and culture, wherever you are on planet Earth. At the end of the day, permaculture is about people. I can't empower anyone, but what I can do is create the right habitat in which you can improve your own self-empowerment. The only people who can empower you are you. And in this process, you come to a wonderful holistic understanding of the power of the natural earth, so that we practice earth care, people care, and fair shares in a way that benefits not just us, but all of nature. I hope you'll join us.
Thank you, Graham. So now we'll hand this over to Renald. Renald, you're up.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm Renald Flores, and I'm the CEO and founder of Flores and System, which is born actually after I took the whole Soil Food Web School training. For me, that has been a life-changing because I was working in private banking before that. And I'm the example that it's possible to transition ourselves from any type of job to something which is meaningful. And for me, that was soil microbiology. Another little quick word here. I have been through permaculture to start with, then went through the whole Savory Institute framework, being accredited professional there. And I wondered one day, everyone's talking about soil and as being the most powerful tool to regenerate, but what do we know about that? And I found the Soil Food Web. Next slide, please. Since then, next slide, please. So yeah, I've started to, I established myself because I'm living in Switzerland, even though I'm French. and I'm mostly working in Europe, and I'll get to that later. Next slide, please. So what am I doing exactly? I've been across the world and figured out. Try to figure out what was the best practices in terms of regeneration, and one thing that I've noticed is that conventional farmers actually don't know anything about organic farming, and even less about soil food web, soil microbiology. So I felt something very strong here. I was like, if we want to have those large-scale farmers to transition the systems, we need to support them, and away from governments and whatever institution that say they want to do it. So basically, those farmers motivated to do the transition need to have some support on how to do it, and this is exactly what I'm focusing on, using all the whole soil food web framework as microbiology, microscope, compost making, and the whole 9 yards. Next slide, please. So continuing on that route, after I started to deploy the whole framework, the soil food web network on a small scale, on the garden market scale in Sweden, and so I wrote a little scientific essay that Elaine read, and that has helped me to get some attention after it got published. So I attended some farmers conference on no-tilling, and I had a chance to present, and there I had my first client, and those clients are appearing here as my current clients, where I'm actually deploying the whole framework of soil regeneration, but at large scale. So that's another challenge than it is than you can do it on a permaculture plot or on a market garden plot. So I'm working in Latvia, where we can call that large scale farming. It's a 5,000 hectares farm, and the trial itself is on 60 hectares. So the whole idea behind it is how to include these all sets of tools that we have within the soil food web network inside the current operations of a conventional farm. So far we have good results, and then we still have challenges and hurdles along the way. And I'm also lucky that I could start working with some French farmer and Austrian farmers. So these to tell you that there is some traction. Some more and more people are interested to figure out how do we actually start to stop destroying the soil. Next slide, please. So started working more than 5 years ago, which means I did the whole classes with Elaine in a little bit more than 1 year. And then from that on, as I mentioned, after having fulfilled my obligations somehow to produce a report of what I had achieved, then on the road, just got my first clients, and then as of today, I'm still up, running, still in business, and then gathering more clients around Europe. Okay, next slide, please. If there is the next, I don't know.
No, I think that was it, Renald.
I think that was it. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks so much, Renald. Okay, Keisha and Casey, you want to talk about catalyst bioamendment?
Hey everybody, I'm Keisha.
Casey.
So we were originally planning on being soil food web consultants when we started the school and learning from Elaine. I think we must have gotten into our microscope section of the foundation course, and we started looking at all the compost that was available in our area, and we were disappointed to find out that there wasn't the life that we were looking for in those composts, especially the large scale producers. And quickly our dream went from being a consultant to, trying to figure out if it was even possible to create these kind of microbial environments at scale. From what we were seeing, there was definitely signs that it's difficult. And it was a huge leap of faith for us to actually get the money together, get the tractors and the big machines together and start Catalyst. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And so we figured it out. I think we met our business partners, when, Casey? It was
in September of 2018. And I think that compost lot was built by December 1st.
Yeah, we jumped in feet first, and we were so lucky to find this little degraded piece of land that's actually near our house here in Nevada City, California. And you can see here all of these windrows. Those we started out by just gathering materials by hand. At the time, we didn't have many big dump trailers. We weren't able to find materials at scale. It was just 4 people with pitchforks, just filling our trucks with all the good materials that we could find. It was definitely one of our missions. You can see the degraded land around us. We wanted to figure out a way to grow the materials that we needed to make the compost on that land, which was an added challenge when we got started. You can see that was in the first year after just one application of compost extract that we were able to actually get the grass growing again. Next slide, please.
So yeah, I mean, the way we started out our business, like it starts slow, when you're breaking into like a new market or starting anything, you kind of got to put yourself out there and just like Renald said, go do talks, go put yourself in front of people, be vulnerable, that's kind of how you start any business, I think. And I mean, we started out right here on the left-hand side. You can see that was our original turner, it was the cheapest one we could find or actually afford at the time. And yeah, it's kind of like we just started making compost. We didn't know if we were going to be successful at all or if anything was going to go anywhere. But, if you build it, they will come. And so we slowly progressed. And now we've been able to actually upgrade the size of our turner right there on the side. And you can see the difference in the photos down at the bottom is just how much more compost we can make in the exact same space. Those 2 photos are literally taken up the exact same area. And it just shows that, just that difference in turner size and that space usage.
I guess I would say composting, large scale composting was never our goal. We're permaculture people, we're doers, we love plants, we love, design, and we love, working with our hands on the land. But it's been such a dynamic career for us. We have so much fun with it. There's so many different aspects of our work, from collecting organic materials to figuring out the best processes to grow microorganisms, to my favorite part, which is working with the microscope and sharing knowledge with our customers. Next slide, please. Yeah, there's so much more to it than just making compost. You can see here, a lot of our different input materials that we figured out over the years work really great. That hay there, we get to bale ourselves. We had to figure out how to do that, how to cure the hay, how to store the hay. Next, you can see some spent grain waste, figuring out how we collect that, how we use it, when the best time to put it in the compost pile, keeping all of our data. It's really exciting. Every time we have a new windrow and we test it with a microscope and it comes up to numbers and we see the life thriving there, we get to pat ourselves on the back and continue to improve our processes. You can see this gorgeous fungi growing in the wood chips at the bottom. Those haven't even been composted yet. So, we have a lot of fun investigating organic materials, talking to our producers, and figuring out ways to source clean materials. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and then this is our new lot. Just kind of showing progression here with our facility and our business is, we started off with just like that teeny little aerial shot that you saw is probably about a 1/4 acre. And just recently this year, at the beginning of the year, we were able to upgrade that pad to like a 1 acre pad now. So, our big mission when we started our business was make sure we didn't grow too fast and start seeing quality kind of fall downhill. So we've been chipping away at it really slow and just trying to make sure we can actually continue to make the quality product while we are scaling. So next slide.
So yeah, this shows, so in our first years, everything was done by hand. Like I said, we always had pitchforks. We're always loading trucks. We were so busy. We're always telling Elaine, we're going crazy working this much. And she assured us that in time we would get our processes down and we would not be working 10-hour shifts every single day. And she was right. So at this point, it's a lot easier on us. We figured out how to keep our windrows moist, how to just manage our time more effectively. And now we've figured out how to bag our product at scale, to bag our product into smaller bags to actually put it in stores. So you can see there, those are our business partners out at an event somewhere selling compost, talking to customers. We just get a lot more time now to work with our community, our customer base, to share information. And it's great because as time goes, I'm not just stuck in the same thing, doing the same repetitive task every day. We actually just, the job just keeps changing and growing and providing us with more opportunities to do things that we love and to spread the word of the microbes around and help people how to understand how to use the product. And honestly, Brian, I don't know if there's another slide. I think that might be it.
One more. This is all you, Keisha, right here.
I just absolutely adore watching the microbes. It's my favorite thing. I love going out hiking and getting teeny little samples from old growth forests. These were actually all collected on a hike with Elaine in Oregon. We were sampling from these giant trees and just finding these fascinating organisms that we don't usually see in our compost. So I don't know. That's just what's so great about the Soil Food Web School. You get the tools to do all this, and then you can make a career as you like. It's not like you're just stuck on a microscope for the rest of your life.
Unless you want to be.
Unless you want to be like me. But yeah.
I think that's
all. Thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Keisha and Casey. All right, I'm up next. So my name's Brian Vagg, and I have a company called Sprouting Soil. A little bit about this. My wife and I started our company about a little over 5 years ago. And a Soil Food Web Advisor. We also have created or part of an organization called the Sarah Soil Biology Association. So Keisha and Casey are part of that as well. And it's a nonprofit meant to do outreach and to try to really transform the local agricultural community in our region. And then I come from a background, how I got into this is my wife and I have a 5-acre homestead here in Auburn, California, so Northern California. And there's a common theme here. I started going down the permaculture route. So when we first got our homestead, my wife and I were very conventional in our methodologies. We rototilled, we put fertilizer down, we used pesticides and herbicides and all that kind of stuff. And it just was crazy to us that we were putting out poison onto our lands. And in the same aspect, we were just seeing reduced production year after year and having to put more inputs, that common treadmill that folks get onto. And we decided to take a big 180, and permaculture was our first, dipping our toe into this. And it was great. We transformed a lot of our property into stopping tilling and creating food forests and doing all, the very good permaculture design things, and we were seeing results. But it still didn't answer some of the whys for me, which was, why am I seeing so much better growth in my food forest? And I understood part of it, but once I read a book called Teaming with Microbes from Jeff Lowenfels, and in that Elaine wrote the foreword, it really unlocked a lot of knowledge for me. It really connected a bunch of dots, and that's how I really went down this route. And I come from a career in technology, so does my wife. We were both working in the high-tech industry for over 2 decades. And we decided to make the switch. We're like, you know what? This is something that's a passion of ours. We love growing food. How can we do this at a much larger scale and help the farmers in our local area and expand it on out to really transform how agriculture is being done today. And we're very passionate about healthy living, producing healthy food. So it really was just a really good fit for us. All right. And as far as our business focus, so, like Keisha and Casey had to make that decision. Where are we going to focus? We're going to be a consultant. We're going to be a compost producer. My wife and I, when we really looked at it, we decided, we want to go down the consulting route and provide lab services. and do some of the remediation work of brewing compost teas and extracts and spraying deep root zone injections and things like that. And then also having, research and education is another part of our business. And I'm actually really lucky that Keisha and Casey live very close to me, because I was struggling early on in my career to find good biologically complete compost, a tool that we can use to help transform that soil. And when they started their business, it was like, oh, okay, great. Now I have a source I can get to. And to be honest with you, most of my clients today actually use their compost because it is superior to anything else that's in this region. So thank you, Keisha and Casey, for that. So I guess the general premise of this is, if you're going to go into this line of work, there are a lot of different areas and opportunities that you can explore. You can be consulting in agriculture, or maybe in landscaping, or residential, urban farming. I mean, there's so many different areas that this will help. When it comes down to it, anywhere there's a growing system, the practices that we do with the Soil Food Web could be applied, and you can see really, really good results in any one of those growing systems. All right, so a lot of people ask you the question, I get this actually quite a bit from folks that are interested in doing this kind of work, what's a day in the life of a consultant? And I have to say that almost every day seems different. There is going to be new things to research, or questions that you have to answer that you have not seen before, or new soils or new agricultural areas that you have to become more efficient or more proficient in understanding. So I find that my days tend to be quite different from each other, which is great. That's keeps the motivation high, I guess, the excitement of what we do, because there's so many different things that we do tackle. But my days, like I said, could be working with a microscope. There are some time frames of the year where I might be spending 6 to 8 hours a day under the microscope, just because we have so many soil samples or leaf samples that we have to measure. Writing reports has actually become, quite a large part of my job. We have to be effective communicators. We have to be able to explain things to our clients so that they can internalize that for themselves. And having data and writing reports is a fantastic way to be able to provide the information that you're trying to convey to your clients. Calls with clients. We do a lot of on-site visits, going out to the farms and looking at their operations. I do research. So there's a lot of times a client will ask, hey, I've got this pest, or I got this disease, or I want to use this product, what's the impact? And so you got to go out and find out information about those pest diseases or products and so forth. And then there's also the business admin. You own your own business, so you have to do bookkeeping and all the other kind of good stuff. And another, kind of aspect about being a consultant is around the, highs and lows. What for me personally, the highs is a sense of purpose. I really truly feel like I am doing something impactful, that I'm changing the way humanity is dealing with their food systems in particular. That's for me is a major sense of purpose. And then I feel like I'm making a difference, and not just a difference for the consumers, but I think I'm making a difference for the farmers. And in fact, I think originally when I got into this, I was much more into, I want to, change the food production that what people eat. And I still feel that. That's still a very a large internal drive for me. But I also see the impact is to the farmers, where they're not having to put on as many chemicals or any chemicals into their systems. That they're, more profit. There's an excitement for a lot of these farmers where it's like, what, I'm able to transform my property into doing this work, and they feel like they're providing a better quality product to their consumers and so forth. So it improves the quality of life, I think, for farmers as well. And then there is the, constant learning. For me, I'm definitely the type of person that ooh, I need to go look at this. Ooh, I need to go look at that. And in reality, we are just scratching the surface. It feels like we're the tip of the iceberg as far as our knowledge around what microbiology and the interaction with plants actually does. And there's so much more research that needs to be done and is coming out. And so getting to learn about all those things is really, really important. The lows, I had come from a corporate world where a lot of business admin things were taken care of for me. So having to learn how to run my own business has definitely been more of the challenge than anything else. But as time goes on, you get more proficient, you get better at it. So it's not so much of a major load as it used to be. And then just time management. When you're working with a lot of different clients, you've got to be able to manage your time effectively so that you can provide the right service to your clients. And for us, there's some seasonality to the work we do. So spring time frame and fall time frame tend to be very, very busy. So you have to be really up on your time management. And there are some peaks and valleys of workload. But one of the things is being a kind of a generalist as a consultant, where I have clients that are in agriculture and residential and homesteading and things like that, that the peaks and valleys are tending to even themselves out a little bit more. I know if you were in a particular just servicing one type of industry or one type of growing system, then you probably have some really serious peaks and really serious valleys depending upon the growing cycles of that client. Okay. So that is me. Let's go ahead and move from the panelist introductions, and we're going to kick off a short video here that's going to talk about the Launch Your Lab offer, and it's also going to give you a really good impression of the Soil Food School and the training programs that we have. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the video. Panelists, if you want to put yourself on mute.
At the Soil Food Web School, our mission is to empower individuals and organizations to regenerate the soils in their communities. We train folks with all sorts of different backgrounds, not just farmers and agricultural professionals. Many of our students don't have a background in agriculture at all, but are individuals who are really passionate about the planet and who are looking for a new career where they can make a big impact on how the soil and our waterways are being treated and on how the food we eat is being produced. So let's take a look at some of the career paths that can be followed by the students of the Soil Food Web School and the different programs that are available. Everyone starts here with the foundation courses, where they cover all the science and application methods behind the soil food web approach. This is a series of 63 online lectures, each followed by a quiz. You can log in at any time, watch a lecture as many times as you like, prepare your notes, and then take the multiple choice quiz. Each lecture is approximately 45 minutes in length, and we recommend that you dedicate around 150 hours to completing the foundation courses. You get to download all the lecture slides and the FC course manual. You also get access to the FC forum, where you can ask questions that Dr. Ingham and her team will answer for you. You can then elect to move directly to the consultant training program, which is where you put all the theory into practice under the guidance of one of our highly qualified mentors. In Stage 1, you'll be challenged to make biological compost and to master the microscope in the Certified Lab Tech program. In Stage 2, you'll use your compost to make liquid biological amendments, which are used for foliar applications or soil drench. And in Stage 3, you will be using your amendments to regenerate a small patch of land in the final project. At the end of the 3 stages, you will be certified as a soil food web consultant, so you can start working with farmers to help them transition away from using chemicals to working in harmony with nature. You will also be certified as a soil food web lab technician, which qualifies you to perform sample analysis for local farmers and growers. You'll be qualified to make biological soil amendments, including compost, extract, and teas that meet the minimum biological requirement for soil regeneration. Alternatively, you can elect to go from the foundation courses to the Certified Lab Tech program first. Here, you'll work one-on-one with your microscopy mentor to develop your skill to the required standard to become a certified soil food web lab tech. This is a good idea if you're not ready to jump right into the consultant training program right away, and if you want to start making connections with farmers and earning a little money first. By performing biological analyses for farmers, you can start to build valuable relationships with folks who may one day become your consultancy clients once you have graduated from the CTP. This is a great way to kickstart your new career as a soil food web professional. Some folks choose to stop at the Certified Lab Tech program, whereas others choose to go all the way with the Consultant Training program. The choice is yours.
We believe that restoring the microbial life to the Earth's soils is a big part of the picture when it comes to protecting the planet we live on. Soil erosion, ecosystem collapse, and even climate change have all been connected to the way we farm. So if you're ready to help the farmers in your region discover a better way of treating the earth while simultaneously increasing their profits, this could be for you. Remember, you don't need a background in biology or agriculture to be successful in this field. If you are interested in joining the soil revolution, this is a great time. With the Launch Your Lab Plus offer, you can register for the foundation courses for just $3,750 and save $1,250 off the regular price of $5,000 through July 22nd. You'll get access to the Certified Lab Tech program for free, saving $1,000. And you'll get the Introduction to Permaculture for free, saving $250. This is an 18-lecture course that covers a wide array of permaculture principles and themes, delivered by Graham Bell, Chair of Permaculture Scotland, and longest-serving permaculture teacher in the UK with 31 years' experience teaching on 6 continents. Permaculture is a regenerative design approach that can be applied to just about anything, from water management, growing systems, dwellings, and much more. Remember, with the LYL Plus offer, you'll pay just $3,750 for the foundation courses, and you'll get the Certified Lab Tech program for free. And you'll also get the Introduction to Permaculture course absolutely free. That's a total bundle value of $6,250, for which you will only be paying $3,750, saving 40% off.
At the Soil Food Web School, our mission is to
Okay, thank you, everybody. Let me just get back from the video. So we do have a special discount coupon for those that are attending the webinar today. And there are 30 coupons available, and they'll expire tonight at midnight. And if you click on the banner down below on your website, you can get the additional $300 off, and actually it will apply that coupon code for you. So with the coupon code, it's a savings of $2,800 total. So that's 45% off. All right, and at the end of this, I'll throw up another one here. And I did get the dates wrong. It says valid through midnight, July 22nd. Well, we know that date's already passed.
So it's 28th.
It's the 28th, yes. We'll get that fixed. All right. Oops, exactly. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and ask you folks to participate in a quick poll. And we ask this at all of our webinars because we just want to make sure we get a good feel of where you're coming from. And so when we launch this poll, you're going to see that there's a little red button in that blue chat box that you have. If you click on there, it will bring you right to that poll. And when we have this poll, it should be launched now. And we're going to ask the question of you, which is, which of the following best describes you? Are you coming from this from a farmer or ag professional? Or are you coming this from an environmental advocate? Or are you coming to this as both, that you kind of, you're in both of those categories? All right, so let's go ahead and we'll leave that poll up and you can go ahead and answer it. And we're going to move on to Q&A. So there was quite a few questions that came in when we had the first section of our webinar. And I'm going to ask this of our panelists. So the first question is, what are the biggest challenges in getting a business started in this field? Who wants to take that one on?
I guess I'll start. I think like the big challenges with any business, right, is like building a client base. You know, it's like, how do you get yourself out there? How do you get people to even know you exist? You know, there's so many different avenues you can take. There's social media, there's just like direct advertising, newspapers, like which one do you choose? You know, so it is difficult. I think it's a difficult part of every business, you know, is, you know, creating a product and then, what do you do with it at the end? So I think, you know, a lot of this is just putting yourself out there. Go talk at anything you can talk at, get your face known, advertise in any way that you can. We do have started our business almost entirely on social media. We haven't really paid for any advertising, but you end up paying with your time and energy. So, you know, it just depends on, you know, what you're comfortable with, where you're at geographically, and, you know, how available, you know, people are to you.
Yeah.
You just put yourself out there.
Exactly.
Yep, I think
Totally.
I think you hit it right on the nose right at the very beginning. It's you've got to make contact with the people that you want to be working with. What kind of crops are you interested in helping with? What fascinates you most? If it's all crops, then great. You can go to all of the different grower groups. But look in your vicinity for where the annual meeting or perhaps the local chapter of any particular plant growing group is meeting. So like the potato growers, they have association meetings, the corn and wheat and row crop. Look around and find out where they are. Go to the USDA Extension Service office closest to you and get a list of the growers in the different areas so you can put out mail or the other place I always like to go a lot is find the particular coffee shop that all of those guys hang out at 6 a.m. in the morning, the last cup of coffee before they got to get out there and get things done. So find out where your target clients are. And so So sorry, I have a little mess up going here with my meeting. I lost you.
We can still hear you, Elaine.
Yeah, I'm babbling to myself. Going,
where
did you guys go? Electronics. There we go. Found myself. So that's, I want to try to, develop something more in the school where we're helping people make contact directly with the clients that they want to work with. So that will be forthcoming, but not yet.
Another challenge that I had when determining my business was, where did I want to focus? That's some big decisions that you're going to make. Keisha and Casey had to go through that, which was consultant, compost producer. I mean, you could do all those things, or you can, kind of narrow yourself down into certain areas that you wanted to go. And so we had to spend some time thinking through what it is that we wanted to do, and then made sure that we had the capital necessary to then get into those areas. Like one of the challenges or one of the areas that we wanted to get into is remediation services. So that would be making compost and applying those for clients. And that was a capital cost we had to consider. We had to buy a brewer and a spray rig and do all those kind of things. So I think that's some forethought or planning ahead of time frame could do well as well. Anybody else want to add to this?
I've been running my own businesses for 40 years. I've had a splendid careering from place to place sometimes. So that thing about focus is a good point. It's about striking a balance between being focused on one thing and having a fallback position, because if your first thing doesn't work, have you got something else you can go to? And I think over time, I've generalized too much, and I would have got further earlier on if I'd focused more. So one of the things that you can learn from is feedback. But at the end of the day, you have to trust yourself, and you have to be your own best judge, because people will tell you you're wonderful because they think you need to hear it, or they'll tell you you're rubbish because that's what they say to everybody. So you need to take with a pinch of salt what people say to you, and be your own best judge. So starting out, the first thing is have a story. The best way to sell to people is to tell stories. Don't just reel off facts. Paint a picture about how wonderful the experience of working with you is going to be. And of course, those stories increase the longer you go on and you've got more stories to tell. But get good at it. As Brian said earlier, communication is vitally important. Pricing and capital. I haven't met a business yet, and I've worked with over 1,000 startup businesses, literally, over that 40 years, because I've been a business mentor for 30 years. I haven't met a business yet that had as much capital as it really needed. So you've got to think about, in early days, how you reinvest as much as you can in the business and how you find friendly funders. Now, I've twice worked with business angels, but as my accountant said to me, remember, Lucifer was also an angel. Because people want to invest in your business doesn't necessarily mean they're awfully nice. They may be just trying to take what you've got off you. So be real careful about who you get to invest in your business. Pricing. How many times have I heard somebody say, what's your unique selling point? I'm going to be better than everybody else and cheaper. Now, this really doesn't stack up, folks. You know, if you're going to be better than everybody else, you'll be value for money, not cheap. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever had in my first business was we weren't succeeding. And the guy said to me, business advisor, he said, double your prices. I said, oh, that's terrible. I'll lose half my customers. Well, then you'll have the same income for doing half as much work, you know? And actually what happened when I doubled my prices is I doubled my customers because people wouldn't employ me because I was too cheap. So they wanted somebody who was reliably good, not top of the end of the market, not down the bottom, but in the middle. And then they thought, this guy's got to be worth it, you know? And admin. Get good at admin from day one. It's a nightmare. Nobody I know in business likes doing it, but you have to. So keep up to date. Always make some time every week to do the accounts. Make sure you're in touch with legislation. I don't know what it's like in the US, but here in the UK, it's a nightmare. Everything is becoming more and more legislated. And so the next thing that happens is as your business grows, you start employing people, that kind of thing. And that's when the nightmare really starts, because now you really hit legislation big time. So be careful about employing people. I don't actually employ anybody anymore. Everybody who works for me is a contractor. And that way I don't have that headache. So do consider that one very well and be happy. That's the only way you'll survive. Yeah. What I notice about the people who succeed is they all have this quality, stickability.
Yep. Great, Graham. That was awesome. Detail down into that. Okay. Anybody wants to add anything before we move on to the next question?
Renald, you haven't said much?
Yeah, well, you guys covered it all. I can repeat on all of you guys' speech and say, yes, that's true. I could just add on my personal example. What really launched me is the report that I had to provide to become a soil consultant. And so I wrote it on a way that was teasing enough, but still true. So any farmer would I try to step on the farmer's shoes and say, well, what is important for a farmer? And I took it from my previous career in finance, and that was money. So I had organized my presentations to go talk to those farmers, and of course that worked, because at large scale, okay, this is maybe harsh a little bit, but it's somehow a business. It's really a business, right? It's growing food and making a lot of money, right? And within this whole idea, yes, of course, had the joy of discovering admin regulations. I have subcontracted people, but very little. But what makes me happy is to see that there is an interest, and all those conventional farmers that I've met have suddenly discovered this new thing, which is called soil microbiology. It doesn't take away all the hurdles, which means all the challenges of getting around the habits. But yes, we can see the value of things, I think, by the efforts that we put in it. And so far, output a lot, and but I'm still up and running. That would be my.
And I think having demonstrations where, think about the USDA, and they have field days every summer, and people come in to see what they're doing and how they've achieved it. And so we always like to have demonstration plots right up against the main road that we're on, so that people drive by and they go, I wish my corn looked like that. What are they doing? And then here's a sign that says field day, come and see what we're doing. How are we increasing our yields, reducing the costs? You interested? Come on, be here at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock on such and such a date, and we'll take you through and show you what we're doing. And then if you want to sign up, you're happy to be their consultant. And you can usually pick up a couple good new clients that way.
Yeah, those always work well, doing trials, field days. Okay, in essence of, or to kind of keep us on time, I'm going to go ahead and move on to a video from Todd Harrington talking about York Farms, and then we'll have another Q&A session right after that. Okay, so panelists, if you can put yourself on mute.
I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of different projects all over the country and overseas. And thank you to Elaine, who is my mentor here with Soil Food Web. We met back in the late 90s, and ever since then, I've been a real advocate of her work and the courses and the classes. So restoring soil biology is not one-size-fits-all solution, unlike what most chemical companies promote. So one of the things that has been a real benefit for what we do is that, no matter what kind of crop system we're working with, the foundation of what we're learning with the Soil Food Web works on everything that's out there on this planet in the soil. We do a lot of work with ornamentals, trees and shrubs and landscapes, to working out in large pastures and corn and soy. We've been very successful with the core foundation of what the course teaches us. So I'm just going to go over one of many of the projects that I had the opportunity to work on, and this is one of my larger projects out in the Midwest in Jacksonville, Illinois. York Farm in particular is one of probably, we're up to about 150,000 acres now with our process and our program with AgroBio, and one of the owners of AgroBio has his own farm. So these two gentlemen, not only do they own and operate a facility or a company that manufactures product and biologicals, including the compost or the BioComplete compost and BioComplete compost teas, is they actually are doing the work. They actually have their own fields and their own farms. So it's actually products that are made by and used for farmers. So they personally, each one of them has over 10,000 acres of soy and corn. We put together a plan early on when I first met these folks, and we put together a 3- and 5-year program, and they stuck to it, and they didn't deviate from the program. And that's one of the challenges with a lot of folks, is they tend to deviate and do a little this and do a little that, and they feel that this combination of working with conventional processes and working with biology will work together. It doesn't always work together, but there is a process to transition when we're going from conventional to the biological regenerative process. But just within the first 3 years of working with these folks, they saved over $1 million just by cutting back on synthetic fertilizers, going from 200 units of nitrogen per acre down to 150 to even 50 units of nitrogen with the same, if not a better yield, which is really exciting to see them do that using the biological process. And so, some of the other things is Roundup. They were 100% using GMO corn and soy and 100% Roundup. We're on year 5 now, and they've eliminated Roundup 100% now. Not only did we see really good results under the microscope, but also visually. And that's one of the things as a practitioner that you want to kind of zoom in on or zone in on is look at things underneath your feet. Look at what's happening. And one of the things that these folks noticed is the rhizomorphs everywhere. They never had this before when I started with them. There was no fungi at all on the top of the soils or in the corn stalk, in the stovers, in the residual. And they also had no earthworms. Well, guess what? We have lots of earthworms now, and we have lots of rhizomorphs. And they also noticed in the residual, especially with the corn stalks, is there's a completely different hue. When you're looking at these fields from the roads, you can see a completely different hue on their fields compared to the conventional farms. Big difference. Because they are becoming so successful with the regenerative process, in the biological process, they actually are now becoming a hub for a lot of their neighbors that are becoming regenerative, because all their neighbors are scratching their head, going, what is it you guys are doing? Because everyone kind of looks at these guys, thinking they're just doing some crazy stuff and wasting their time and money, but they've actually are saving money, a lot of money, and they're growing higher yields than their neighbors, and they're saving thousands, if not millions of dollars. I mean, it's really exciting.
Okay, it's always great to hear from Todd. He's doing some great work, pretty much all throughout the United States, but in particular the work he's doing with York Farms is fantastic. Okay, let's move on to another Q&A session here.
I've had the opportunity.
Sorry, play it again. There we go. All right. So panelists, just make sure you're unmuted, and let's jump into some more questions here. We've got a question from Gabby. And Gabby, and this is a great question, by the way. I like this question a lot. As an agronomist, in an area where conventional farming is practiced with a heavy reliance on fertilizing and chemicals, how should I slowly introduce regenerative thinking and practices to farmers? I will have the opportunity to curate grower meetings this winter, and I want to introduce core ideas and a new framework of thinking to skeptical farmers in the area. Any advice on talking points for farmers? Okay, anybody want to take this one?
Well, it's having decreased costs where you don't have to buy the inorganic fertilizers because you've put the biology into the soil and gotten normal nutrient cycling the way Mother Nature's done it for the last 1 billion years. With rooted plants, you get that normal nutrient cycling going. You want to have the disease prevention. We want all surfaces of the plant covered, so there is no way the disease-causing organisms can get close to any of the plant tissues. We want the normal competition and consumption and inhibition that happens when you have these beneficial organisms on those leaf surfaces. So you don't have diseases, you don't have pest problems anymore. We've got to get the balance of ammonium and nitrate right in that soil so that there are no weeds in the system, or the weeds are the things that are wimpy and diseased and unhappy, and whatever your crop isn't having that problem. We want you to sequester carbon so you can get carbon credits. We want to have the crew of microorganisms that will decompose any toxic materials, any leftover pesticides, all of the 7 overarching principles of benefit that a healthy soil will give your plant. So we want all those things so your growers can see they don't need the inorganic fertilizers, they don't need the pesticides, they don't need the herbicides. They're going to increase yields and reduce costs. And I don't know any farmer that is going to refuse to look at and try to understand how they can get these benefits.
Yeah, my experience with farmers is that they're very pragmatic people, especially when it comes to dollars and cents. Their margins usually really thin. They have high input costs, and so anything that you can do to help their cost profile, they'll definitely pay attention to. And I think, Gabby, that's probably a really good way to start to make the farmers really want to know more about growing in this way. My experience with agronomists, for the most part, have actually been really great. A lot of my farmers already have agronomists on board, and a number of my farmers, the agronomists, have been very receptive to farming with biology and making serious changes to the operations to really focus more on growing good microbes in the soil. I've had some other agronomists that come from a very conventional standpoint and just do not believe that anything but agrochemical farming is the way to go, and it can be somewhat of a challenge. So you, Gabby, as being an agronomist and actually really wanting to know more about this is fantastic. I think you're a great ally for those of us that are really trying to push more farming with biology as a forefront versus the conventional or standard organic means. Anybody else want to add to this? Go for it, Renald.
Yes. On the top of what you just said, you and Elaine, I would also stress the fact that you want to bring the idea of mitigate the risk and financial risk for the farmer. So the concept of starting a trial is important at that scale, because that would just give them the feeling that they wouldn't lose all their crops in case it doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. So another very pragmatic thing when I offered my services to start with, it's that I actually calculated what is the cost of a conventional farming treatment on whatever surface, and I just took that money value and I just give that price for more services. And the very truth was that when I had the final meeting to see whether or not we would do it, well, the farmer just took his calculator and then just pushed his buttons like, okay, it cost me that much in organic fertilizers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you cost that much. Okay, let's go. And that has been how I've been through. And that I believe that, I would highly suggest that.
Yeah, I would say that it's a very common thing in initial meetings. A lot of farmers will pull out their calculators with their phones and start crunching numbers right away and say, okay, I think this might save me this amount. Go ahead, Graham.
I avoid calling it conventional farming. Conventional farming hasn't used chemicals for thousands of years. I call it industrial or chemical farming. I wouldn't raise that day one and put the guys back up, but, let's be clear about this. This is a Johnny-come-lately, which has burned itself out very quickly. The National Farmers Union in the UK, which is a notoriously conservative organisation, says we have only 60 years soil left here. And this is a post-glacial landscape, so we have very rich soils from that. I think a key concept to get across is true yield. True yield is not the tonnage through the farm gate. They might get more chemical farming. True yield is the difference between what you get out and what you put in. So when you take away those costs, as you rightly say, you take away a lot of expense, which means that you can get more profit, sometimes from less yield. And also, it may be because you're now growing something organic that you can get a premium. That's not guaranteed. But also, think about all the other benefits that you're bringing with it. You are stopping poisoning the water table by not putting poison on the land. You are encouraging wildlife. And a key issue, and one of the major benefits for me, is this. Farming has the highest suicide rate of any occupation in the world today. Many farmers are very unhappy with their lot. And one of the things that I've noticed talking to people who've gone the regenerative agriculture route is they are much happier. I was talking to a farmer in Kildare recently who has turned his whole farm to no-till and gradually eliminated all the chemical inputs. And he says he's never been so happy in 20 years because it's transformed the landscape in which he lives. Mm-hmm. He wakes up to birdsong, which had more or less disappeared, and so on. So I think mental well-being and good feelings about what you do is a major output from going this process. And I'll give you a couple of examples where you can check this out in other countries. I mentioned Alan Savory earlier. Read Alan Savory about his transformation of farming in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa, you know, and it just leaps from the page at you that he's a much happier man as a consequence. There's an English author called James Rebanks who wrote a book called The Shepherd's Life about farming Herdwick sheep in the Lake District. This is a very, very hard climate in the northwest of England, and they're very hardy sheep. You can leave them out on the mountains in the winter. And at the end of The Shepherd's Life, he says, I might not ever make any money doing this, but I'm going to carry on doing it because I could always earn money teaching or writing. 5 years later, he wrote a second book called English Pastoral after he was introduced to a female advisor who got him to let the streams go back to flowing through his landscape, stop ditching them, let the hedges grow, stop cutting them, and so on. And he's planted thousands of trees, and now he's not only happy, but he's also profitable.
Which in its own right also helps bring some additional happiness where you don't have those additional worries of debt and everything else that gets piled on. Yeah, that's good points, Graham. Anybody else want to make another comment?
I kind of had a comment. It's like something as a point to bring up. I mean, we were with a farmer not too long ago with Brian, actually, and liability is going to be like a big thing coming up with all these people who are out there physically applying these pesticides and chemicals is cancer rates and lawsuits, right? Like these are a thing that these farmers are seriously going to have to start thinking about coming up in the next 5 to 10 years is workers actually suing them for applying these chemicals because we know now that they are actually causing cancer. So that was a huge point for him. He actually brought up that it's like if you're not actually in those chemicals, then you know when you get rid of that stuff, then you don't. That's one thing that your business is that could literally take down your business, right? If like a wrong like that. So.
Well, the employees are much happier too. They don't have to wear all the suits, and you know, I'm sure there's so much information now about coming up about the toxicity of a lot of these chemicals that the workers are, you know, that they feel, wow, I don't have much of a voice. I got to still, you know, do this work, and yet I'm still being exposed to these things. So I know the farmers that apply compost teas and extracts and so forth tend to be just amazed. What do you mean I don't have to wear, you know, full hazmat suits and there's no skull and crossbones symbols, you know, on the products that you're using and so forth. So it does have that kind of carryover effect, I think, too. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I may just add an extra thing here, which is probably one of my bias, is bring up the science. Just like, okay, we will not just talk about soil microbiology life, but also human life, aquifers, and then regulations, and all these kind of topics that, as a matter of fact, when you get away from just the financials, you also trigger in the farmer the sensitive part, the human part of things. As Graham said, you're talking to humans at the end of the day, and I would say this has to be used as well.
Yeah, agreed. So Gabby, I hope we give you some good points to be able to think about as you get into this, you know, the season's changing and you can go out and start talking to the different farmer groups. And, you know, hopefully if you could take the courses through the school, you'll have a lot more information to be able to arm yourself with to be able to have that kind of deep discussions with those farmers. Okay, let's take another question before we move on to the next section here. And this question was from Rue. And Rue says, who comes to you for your services? What exactly are they looking for you to do? That's a good question. Who wants to take that one?
I say it would be anybody who grows plants. There's going to be a portion that's looking at not having to pay for the toxic chemicals, getting rid of that problem not trying to farm that way. And, we help them achieve those goals. And that's why that's it. Most people come to us because they want to improve what they're eating, having more nutrients, having more yield, hopefully, as well. Not using all those toxic chemicals. And
I think you're spot on. I have gotten requests and have participated in a number of projects that are across the board. I'm talking from residential landscaping, commercial landscaping, to homesteading, large-scale agriculture, small-scale agriculture. It's kind of across the board. And I think a lot of people are very interested in removing the chemical paradigm from their growing systems into growing with biology. And there's a lot of, the zeitgeist is kind of moving in that direction. There's much more of the mainstream discussing about the potential benefits of using, soil biology, or focusing on soil biology and so forth. And what do they exactly looking for, myself to do? In some cases, it's simply just taking baseline the microbial community in doing lab work. And others, they want me to tell them how to run their operations. As far as how do I change all my management practices, and how do I do this kind of growing. So it's anywhere between just barely having a consultation with them or being extremely in depth with the client. So it is really across the board. At least that's been my experience.
Our compost lot in the beginning, almost all of our customers were soil food web consultants that had actually been through Elaine's program, or people who already had an idea about soil microbiology and wanting to, transform their soil in that way. But the more that we get out, it's a lot of what Brian's saying. At this point, we're working with folks that just have balcony gardens, or parents that want their front lawn to be a healthy place for their kids and pets to play. There seems to be no limit to the type of jobs and customers that we're getting once people understand actually what the product is and how to use it.
Right. Anybody else want to add to that? One thing I'll add to it is, early on in my career, I was out there more marketing myself by going to grower groups and talking and doing education, that type of thing. In recent, it's been a lot more referral business is coming to me. So I'm getting, because I do a lot of work in vineyards and I do a lot of work in nut crop orchards, I'm getting a lot more referrals in those areas because farmers talk. They start seeing results from their neighbors and say, hey, well, who are you working with to be able to get these kind of results and that type of thing. So my type of business now is moving much more into a referral type of business versus me actively marketing. So there's just kind of a tangent on that.
On the permaculture front, we may be speaking to a slightly different audience, but the short answer is anybody and everybody. I was recently talking to the Queen's banker who had just retired, aged 84. Can you imagine being a banker until you're 84? And about his holiday cottage. Well, his holiday cottage is an 8-bedroom house with a 150-acre farm and 2 miles of salmon fishing on the River Tweed. He's got a proper house somewhere else, right. But they're delighted to talk, and because he's so wealthy, he's been able to turn the whole thing organic overnight. And more big landowners in Britain are rewilding and so on, because they're seeing that chemical farming is simply not profitable, and it's hard work. So more and more people are going that way. In the past, we had a tree and plant nursery as part of what we do, which has been sold on in the last couple of years. And we supplied forest gardens, whole forest gardens at a time, to lots of schools and lots of community gardens, because a lot of what we're involved in is educating people. And that's a pathway in to the next generation, understanding better and getting to people who are in food poverty and showing them, rather than going to food banks, how they can grow their own food and making land available for them to do that in communities. Housing associations have helped us and so on. So, I don't dismiss the one person who's going to come and wants to talk to you for 20 minutes. And If that person benefits from it, how many other people will they tell? Everything is exponential.
Sure.
Bill Mollison, founding father of permaculture, said, I don't think I can save the world on my own. I think it's going to take 3 of us.
That's so funny. Bill's a character. All right. Any other follow-ups to this before we move on to our short video on nutrient cycling?
Well, we do need to keep expanding the number of people. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of getting in contact with all the growers everywhere. People who live in urban settings, they need to take every empty lot, put the compost out there, make that compost, and start applying it. And now they take care of the heavy metals. They deal with all the toxics that were in that soil by getting the proper biology out there. So you can do gardens, you can be feeding your neighborhood. It's an amazingly broad set of things that people can be doing.
3 million people have done a permaculture course somewhere on planet Earth. That's 0.08% of the Earth's population. Like you say, we haven't started.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I always get this question too of people that are interested in becoming consultants, and especially that they live in my general area. So they already know consultants here. And one of the questions they always kind of get concerned about is the competition. Are you okay talking with me? Because, we're going to be close, we'll be competitors, that type of thing. And the opportunity space is so enormous that we are not anywhere in a competitive field. I call it co-opetition. I'd rather much have a saturation of consultants in this area so that we can make large scale transformations. I can't even fathom what that's going to be, where all of a sudden I'll be in a competitive nature with consultants that live around me, because there's just so many farms and so much land that has to be converted.
Yeah, I just add on that as how the Soil Food Web School actually has helped me to get some new clients. So you on board, and then suddenly you become a soil consultant. And on my side, okay, I'm in Europe, and we are very few. However, I could enjoy that as well. And here in Europe, so we are 2. Well, let's say nearly 3, and we have gathered, and then we work together, because one day I can do the microscope, and then the other day I cannot, and so I need some support from the people who can provide the same quality and the same approach and the same framework. So as you say, Brian, there is not an idea at all of competition. It's the other way around.
Exactly.
And I think I think there's a need for people who do just the microscope part of, for all of the consultants that are out there dealing with individual growers. They're bringing back samples that need to be run, but they need to be out there with other clients. So having a central person who does most of the microbiology, most of the microscope work, that's a huge option. So I think we'll see more and more requirement for that kind of, you'll have more than one person doing different jobs.
Agreed. Okay, let's go ahead and move to an animation on nutrient cycling. So this will be about a 5-minute video, and then we'll finish today's webinar with a Q&A session. And again, this probably takes about another 30 minutes. Okay, so panelists, if you can go on mute. And
how does nutrient cycling work? During photosynthesis, plants combine carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and sunlight to produce simple sugars and carbohydrates. But just like humans, plants can't live on sugars and carbs alone. Fortunately for plants, there's a rich source of nutrients right under their feet, in the soil parent material and in organic matter. When dead plant material, or organic matter, falls to the surface of the soil, it's gradually decomposed by microorganisms. Nutrients are then released into the soil in plant-available form. The next generation of plants then absorbs these nutrients, and so nutrient cycling begins again. We humans remove nutrients from this cycle when we take food from our fields, but these are easily replenished when microorganisms harvest nutrients from the parent material, the rocks and pebbles, and the much smaller particles such as sand, silts, and clays. At the molecular level, the parent material comprises large lattice structures which hold nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, boron, calcium, iron, and all the other nutrients that a plant needs. With a balanced soil food web in place, plants can control the nutrient cycling that's happening in the root zone. They invest some of the sugars and carbs they produce during photosynthesis into the soil in order to feed bacteria and fungi. This causes bacterial and fungal populations to increase dramatically. The bacteria and fungi then get busy harvesting nutrients from the organic matter and parent material, absorbing these nutrients into their bodies. Predatory microorganisms are attracted, and they begin consuming the bacteria and fungi. The wastes left behind by these predators contains an abundance of nutrients in plant-available form. These are easily absorbed into the plant roots. So the plant gets a good return on its investment, exchanging sugars and carbs in return for all the other nutrients it requires. This results in well-nourished, resilient plants and in nutrient-dense food for us humans. With a balanced soil food web in place, plants are able to access all the nutrients they need, on demand, simply by varying the compounds they release into the soil. This means that farmers don't need to waste money buying and applying fertilizers. The soil food web costs very little to maintain by comparison. Having nutrient-rich plants results in greater yields and improved quality of the produce. Reduced costs and greater yields result in dramatically increasing profits for many farmers who have used the soil food web approach. The nitrogen-based fertilizers that farmers use are made using huge amounts of fossil fuels. Only around 40% of these inorganic fertilizers get absorbed by crops. The rest is either volatilized, polluting the atmosphere, or it runs off polluting our rivers, lakes, and oceans, causing algal blooms and dead zones that are a major environmental problem. So restoring the soil food web leads to nutrient-rich food for the consumer, increased profits for the farmer, and also benefits the environment. For more information about the numerous benefits of the soil food web and how you can get involved, please visit soilfoodweb.com.
All right, panelists, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, let's jump back into Q&A. Okay, so we have a question here from Ryan, and Keisha and Casey, I think this is going to be right in your wheelhouse. I'm struggling to get enough quality materials to produce compost. Are there any tips in getting materials? Is it worth it growing my own materials?
Definitely, especially the green material. We find it's best to just grow it if you have the space to. But just like with everything, talking to your local farmers, we're always meeting up with, manure producers, hay producers, folks that are doing work with reducing the woody material for fire clearing. So it's important to have these conversations with people and just kind of keep building your rapport and meeting as many organic material producers as possible. We've actually come to a point now where we just pay everyone for their materials because it gives them a reason to keep the material quality for us, to be honest. And it's a great way to support them while they support you. So we've had problems in the past with just, folks not being completely honest about how they've treated their animals or how they've treated their grasses and hays. So it's a challenge, but getting out and just talking to the community is really the best way to go about it. Sometimes we even chase down chip trucks. We do crazy things.
They're like, who are these crazy people?
People were stalking wood chip trucks, I feel bad. I run up when their truck stops and I knock on the window. And
oh, hello.
Yeah. It is a challenge.
I mean, honestly, like in the beginning, that was what we spent, 90% of our time doing. It had nothing to do with actually making compost. It was trying to find the materials to make the compost. So yeah, I mean, right now we have 15 acres of pasture that we cut and bale and we actually treat as well. So yeah, like if you can grow it yourself, it's going to be the highest quality you're going to get. So
you'll know exactly what happened to it. as opposed to, you go to someplace, oh yeah, we've got all these bales, and you say, have you treated it with an herbicide? Oh, no, we would never do that, not ever.
The classic line is this: it is organic, they just didn't certify it.
Yeah.
Right.
Trust me.
We hear that every time.
You bring all those bales back and you put it into your first compost pile, and the microorganisms are just dead.
Not there.
Nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, what do you get to do with this stuff? And so you got to dredge up some of those microorganisms that can use those herbicides. And you kind of have to cross your fingers and hope that you can find them locally in your indigenous area.
Yeah. I also think that farmers themselves have a good opportunity to make compost, because typically they're going to have residues that are going to be left over from the farming operation. And in some cases they have to pay, there's a cost to them to be able to get rid of those residues. If there's a way to reincorporate them back into the farming operation by creating compost, I think that's a good way as well. And I think one thing I was going to mention too is just, you can also, if you're going to create your own composting business, work with farmers. They give you input materials that you can trust, and that maybe you give them a deal on some of the compost in return.
We try to be self-sufficient. When we had the nursery, of course, we were giving away compost in potted plants and so on. So we did import material, and we have a local supplier that we can get such stuff from. But one of the problems here is New Zealand flatworm. And if you start bringing in anything with soil in, it's been an escape from Edinburgh Botanics. It's now rife all across Britain in certain places. And, it eats earthworms, and it doesn't have a predator here. So we tend to avoid inputs as much as possible. And now we're just rotating with our own system. We basically make all our own, but we're not broad scale here. We're farming we're gardening rather than farming. So it's not such a huge thing, but I always welcome wood because we chip it ourselves and so on. And I'm always interested in the way in which wood increases fungal content in the soil over pasture, which is more bacterial and so on. So we're always watching these things.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add something to the conversation? Okay. Let's move to another question. This was an interesting question from Jay. And Jay asks, are these farms employing permaculture practices, i.e. multiple crop farming versus monocrop, in addition to soil regeneration? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, we don't need to worry about rotations when you're basically putting a massive amount of that diversity back every time you put compost back into the system. Anytime you put, bio-complete compost, you're putting all of that diversity back. So there's your input of diversity. You're improving that diversity all the time whenever you're putting in compost or teas or extracts. So that instead of rotating the crops, you are improving diversity of the soil. So it's constantly getting back into that soil. No matter what the weather is going to be next summer, we will have all of the diversity of all of the organisms that will be able to deal with those weather patterns and still supply your plant with all the nutrients, with all of the disease protection, with all of the tying up toxic chemicals, all of those 7 overarching principles that I was talking about. So we really don't need rotation because, think back to the organic, why do you have to rotate? It's because the belief was that you would take up all the nutrients that kind of plant needed to take up in that 1 or 2 growing seasons. So you had to rotate to a different plant because that different plant would need a different set of nutrients. And it's sort of like, think that one through for a minute. All plants need all of the same kinds of nutrients. It may be slightly higher or slightly lower in certain nutrients, but all plants need all of those nutrients in order to put on more biomass. So, the second thing that you were told to rotate was because if you grow the same plant in the same place for a very long period of time, then those diseases start to win and wipe out your crop. Well, not if you've got all of the competitors, the consumers, and the inhibitors of those problem organisms. You don't have to worry about have diseases. Every year your soil gets healthier and healthier. It can deal with more and more different kinds of diseases. So there's no worry. So there's no need to rotate. Weeds are not a problem now that you understand that you have to have some NH4, ammonium, present in the soil, not just nitrate. That gets rid of the weeds. So we don't have to be rotating or moving. So all of the problems are dealt with by getting the proper biology back into the system.
Yeah, it's funny for me too. Most of my agriculture clients are definitely monocrop farmers, that they grow a crop or a couple different crops, but it's a single crop in that particular plot of land. And as we start to move more to a biological system and we start looking at management practices, we start adding in some more permaculture type of techniques or premises. I have a vineyard that we're working with. It's all natural. We haven't used a single chemical since we planted this vineyard 3 years ago. But we wanted to be much more resilient around pest management. So we created or planted a lot of hedgerows around the outside of the vineyard to have multi-species plants to really have insectatories for all of our predator bugs to take out any of the bad bugs or pests that would come into the vineyard. And with my orchard cropping, we're very much into no longer getting bare floors and trying to get a mix of perennial cover plants on the floors and a mix or diversity of species that are now growing in with those nut crop plants. So I think it's a series of kind of baby steps, especially for those monocrop farmers. I know that there are some very successful food forest growers that grow on a little bit larger scale and providing not just for their own selves or just homestead, but actually selling this as a product. And they themselves started that from the get-go. That was their main design goal when they built that particular orchard or growing system. So I definitely think you don't have to be in the monocrop, but we can also start to move people away from just monocrops themselves as well. Anybody else want to tackle this question?
We guess we got it all answered. On to the next question. I'm sure we forgot a few things in there.
For sure. So Keisha and Casey actually have to leave. So Keisha and Casey, I'll give you an opportunity to wave and say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Keisha and Casey. Thanks.
Health, and then you can't make every meeting all the way to the end. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Bye, everybody.
All right, guys. Thank you guys so much.
All right, awesome.
Thanks.
Okay. So we got another question here, and this one's kind of a tactical question, but this one comes up quite a bit when I work with farmers, which is, can we use old sprayers to apply biological products? How do we clean the chemicals out of it so it doesn't kill the microbiology? Anybody want to take that one?
Typically, you're going to have to do some good scrubbing to get any of the toxic chemicals that might be absorbed into that surface. If you're working with stainless steel, not to worry. Just get rid of all the biofilms that might be on the inside of that tank. And it can be a challenge sometimes if the tank's fairly enclosed and you're trying to get your arm up and around into something. All of the different spaces with the surfaces, and you wonder why they made a tank that's got all of those occluded corners and things, because that, of course, is where the biofilms are going to start to happen. A biofilm is the microorganisms will start to glue themselves to the surface, especially if water's not splashing and washing and removing that biofilm, so things caught up in the top of your tank. and they will form that first layer. Then the second layer glues on, the third layer glues on, the fourth, and now pretty soon that bottom layer of that biofilm is going anaerobic because oxygen is being used up faster than oxygen can diffuse into that film. And so it goes anaerobic. You start having some low pH problems, perhaps. Certainly will start to select for those disease-causing organisms that require reduced oxygen conditions. And facultative anaerobes, true anaerobes, eventually they'll start to grow, and many of those are going to be disease-causing organisms for human beings or for animals. So you have to get rid of those biofilms. You've got to get them washed out. You always want to look inside of your brewer or inside of your sprayers to make sure that it's easy to clean them. The easiest way to clean them, of course, is just to take a high-pressure hose and blast off using water any of those biofilms, but you've got to be able to get into all of those hard-to-reach surfaces. So you probably want to use something like a hydrogen peroxide solution, H2O2, is probably the best because it doesn't leave a residue. When the hydrogen peroxide breaks down, it breaks down into water and oxygen, so it doesn't leave a residue behind that you now have to get rid of. If you do chlorine, if you use any of the industrial cleansers, you're going to have to clean with that material, hope that you get all of the biofilm off, and then can wash and rinse the cleaning agent out. And that too can be kind of a difficult problem, especially if they've located the drain in a sort of strange place and you have puddles of material of that cleaning agent left behind. So you've got to do some really good cleaning. The next step that you do is to fill your sprayer with a good compost tea that you already have looked at, so you know what the concentrations of all the bacteria and the fungi and the protozoa and nematodes, you know what those are before you put the tea or the extract into the sprayer. And now rev up the sprayer, go start spraying and collect some of the spray. Now you don't want to hold your cup right up to the nozzle where things are spraying out, because think about that, being sprayed out at 100 psi, for example, and now you're going to hit that surface of the cup that's maybe 2 inches away, and smack, all your organisms explode, and you think that there's something wrong with that sprayer. No, you want to adjust how far away are you, and so that's why it's really nice to have adjustable pressures on the sprayer that you're using, so you capture your sample, your tea, out at the right distance, so it's arcing down, so it hits the bottom of your cup at 10 psi or 20 psi. Not a problem. You aren't going to cause your microorganisms to explode. Kind of think of yourself as the same way. If we blew you out of a cannon and you were going 3 Gs or something and you hit a cement wall, yeah, that would be a pretty messy splat, wouldn't it? Don't do that to your microorganisms. So yep, you can clean up the sprayers. Just be thoughtful about how you're testing. So if you see a 5 or 10% reduction in the organisms in the tea or the extract that's now been sprayed out, okay, you can live with that. It's when you have 50% reduction or 90% reduction in the organisms, it's just, why spray using that sprayer? Go sell that sprayer and buy another one that has a system that's not going to be harming the organisms as you're spraying them out.
Yeah. And that's such a common question I get from farmers all the time, which is, I already have equipment. Can I reuse it? And it falls that it depends. Let's go take a look at it. And we have very good techniques to be able to make that determination as far as, yes, the sprayer works fine. You cleaned it well enough. Or nope, the sprayer is just not going to cut it as far as biology is concerned. And then you work with your farmer to then spec out what is the appropriate or correct sprayer that you should use. It's a very common, I think, a thing that we deal with all the time.
And most of the time, sprayers that you already have can be modified. They can be dealt with. You take all the filters out of all of the spray arms, and you don't want to have bacteria and fungi build up or organic material build up on that filter, because then anything else that goes through that almost plugged filter, all the bacteria and fungi, protozoa, and nematodes end up here instead of going out there. So you want to pull all of the filters out. You want to make sure there are no 90-degree turns. So we go through all of that in the classes. And so we make sure that you understand why these are the things to look for.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to that? Renald or Graham? Okay, well, we're coming up with 5 minutes left. So let's take one more question, and we'll just be really quick about that, and then we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar today. And this is an interesting question from Ed. And Ed asked, as a certified soil food web consultant, will we learn how to recommend the correct irrigation, planting, and harvesting techniques for either fruit trees or vines, including perennial understory plants? And I'll go ahead and take this one to start with. It's really kind of a yes and no. What we really teach you is the ways to assess the irrigation that your farmer is using. Is it correct? Will it suffice as far as being able to put out the right biology through, let's say, fertigation with a compost extract? We have different ways of helping you understand about planting, making sure that you are able to apply good biology in the planting cycle. That when you're putting a plant or seed in the ground, you're also applying good microbiology to support that plant while it's growing. We don't necessarily get into every planting technique, but there are ways for you to be able to look at the farmers using now and come up with the right way to incorporate biology into that planting system. And then the same thing with harvesting. What does the management practices of harvesting do, and how does this farmer harvest? Is it harmful to the microbiology? If it is, then we'll find alternate ways to be able to do that harvesting in those systems. And so, I always kind of look at it this way. When I'm working with a client, I'm in a partnership now with that farmer, let's say, and the farmer is going to be bringing lots of knowledge about their operation, the plants that they grow, how they actually harvest and plant and do all those kind of things. I'm bringing the soil biology knowledge, and it's really a marriage of those two things to say, let's develop new management practices, new ways of doing things that are going to help the biology, but still allow for you, farmer, to be profitable and still raise your crop. And it's that kind of partnership, I think, that is really the way to approach it with a lot of clients. Anybody want to add to that?
I think you did a good job.
All right. Renald, Graham, anything else you want to add? Okay. Well, I say we are at the top of the hour for the webinar. So I like to do a few things. First, I want to just let everybody know, or just put this back up on the screen, about the special discount coupon. That's for today's webinar registrants, and we did get the date correct, so it's valid through midnight, July 29th, and there's, again, 30 coupons available, and you should see on your webpage, click here to get the additional $300 off, and then we'll go ahead and apply that coupon for you. All right, I'd also like to give some thanks. So there are a lot of people behind the scenes who are making this happen. So I want to thank everybody that is helping us, promote the webinars, run the webinars behind the scenes, helping us get all the questions. We couldn't do it without all the support that we have. I'd also like to thank all the panelists today. So, Keisha and Casey, they left, but obviously, their knowledge is invaluable. Renald and Graham, thank you so much for providing your insights to a lot of the questions in our discussions today. And as always, thank you, Elaine, for all the work that you've done and your decades of experience in being a mentor to us all. So So thank you.
And of course, thank you, Brian, for hosting. We wouldn't get through this in such an organized fashion without you. So thank you very much. And Graham,
No
thank
problem.
you for participating as well. Renald, yes, it's great to have you here.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I say at this point, we're going to go ahead and close the webinar.